Jai Sri Ram, welcome to Bharat Marg, welcome Vinay Ji to Bharat Marg. Today is going to be a very, absolutely, very uh, heart and saddening topic. Okay, 2000 more children buried, Christian history of Canada. Okay, and radar search finds more than 2000 anomalies, and physical search also found what believed to be child's jawbone fragments. Okay, residential school killing knows no limit. Click, watch this horror Christian expansion and exclusive interview with political analyst Vinay Ji. Comment and share. Okay, so this is what we are going to talk about, friends. Before going further, if you're watching this video, please make sure to subscribe to our channel if you didn't already, Bharat Marg, and please make sure to press the notification bell to make sure that you get notified as we go uh, as we as we post, as we go live. You get to know with the title, basically. Okay, and also please like the video, comment on the video, share the video as much as you can to spread the message. Okay, and on just a side note, friends, in Tamil channel, we have a Tamil channel called Tamil Udayan, where we are going to do the similar thing, that is a Canadian history and Christian expansionism, how this country became a Christian country. We are going to do a program on it. Okay, so make sure to like, if you are a Tamilian, knows Tamil, make sure to go to Tamil Udayan, Tamil Udayan. Please go there and subscribe the channel to get notified so that you can join us. Okay, but anyway, Vinay Ji, 2000 more children buried, Christian history of Canada. It says, what is this happening? How did if you can just also enlighten us a little bit about this particular topic, and also how how Canada became a Christian country too. If you can just throw some
Yeah.
shit
So
light.
let's start off with the 2000 anomalies that were found, using a radar that's called a ground penetrating radar. It's called GPR technology.
Mm-hmm.
GPR is ground penetrating radar technology, right? So, and it was at the site of a former residential school in Saskatchewan. Uh, but what is a GPR anomaly, right? Like, when they say anomaly, let's talk about that first, because so that the viewers understand what it
Mm-hmm.
means. It doesn't mean that 2000 graves were found. What it means is, so when you're looking for a grave, let's say a site where you think people or children were buried. So GPR technology basically uses something, which is pretty mind-boggling, actually, if you look at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like conventional radar, GPR does not provide clear photo-like picture, but images that are more like rough outlines. So it just gives you an outline of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a grave form, it could be something else, it could be, and that's why they call it anomaly. It's really, anomaly means it could be that, it could be, it maybe something else. So that's what it means. It could be a mistake. Somebody has recognized this as a grave, but it could be a mistake, or it could be something different from a grave. So, but it's a suspect. That's what we need to understand here. So,
But
GPR.
they found jawbones too.
I'm sorry.
They found the jawbones, child jawbone fragments over there.
Right. Yeah. They did find some, maybe a one or two graves. I'm not sure how many. We'll talk about that. But what it is, GPR devices usually look like a lot like a high tech lawnmower, and they kind of go on the ground. Okay, like a lawnmower, right? They're mainly used for detecting groundwater, like to see if there's any water underneath, utility lines, because when you're digging something, you don't want to break the utility lines or whatever, right? Hydro lines or water lines or whatever underneath. archaeological features, like something sometimes, you could be digging in a site that is ancient, and you're looking for some artifacts and stuff, so you're looking for that. And
Mhm.
buried explosives in war zones, they use that as well. So things like that. But in this case, they used it to see if they could find graves of
Mhm.
kids, right? So in the case of looking for unmarked graves and burial location, what this piece of equipment is able to show are areas that have been disturbed.
Mhm.
Okay, so when you dig a grave, the soil changes, the composition changes, the density can change, and the ground penetrating radar, which is GPR, can actually pick up that change. You
Mhm.
understand what I mean?
Mhm.
So when looking for unmarked graves, we may be looking, could be looking for breaks in soil structure, something missing that are similar in size to a dug grave. Okay, because in this case, keep in mind that when they meaning the residential school wardens and the people who are running the residential schools,
That's
when they buried these kids, they buried them in unmarked graves. They buried them en masse. They dug a huge hole, and they just started dumping these bodies in those
bodies of the
holes,
children
bodies of the children.
who were going to the school there, actually.
Exactly, this is what they did. So we will go back to I mean, like, for some of the viewers, they are not understanding what this is all, what we are talking about. So we'll go into that history in a second, but just let's talk about this GPR technology. So grave anomalies will look different depending on soil condition, geology of the site, environment, and climate. Such anomalies, however, are not necessarily indicators of human burial. You know what I mean, right? That's why it's called anomaly. So it doesn't mean when they said 2,000 anomalies, it doesn't mean they found 2,000 graves. It looks similar to grave. It looks similar to a place where somebody has been buried, but somebody has to actually dig into it and do a lot more investigation, and find out, because GPR cannot definitively say that that is something. Okay, it could be a stone under the ground, it could be a clump of clay, it could be a piece of wood, or it could be something. So we don't know yet, but it looks like a grave. That's what it
Mhm.
means, anomalies. So what do
Mhm.
they do to investigate this? In order for people to confirm what is under the ground, the best option is to start digging. That's the only way you do it. So you do like a miniature core drilling. You don't have to dig the whole site, right? You just do a small, like you do a
Like a
bore.
borewell.
Right. So you just do a miniature core drilling, and then you go whatever deep, however deep you want, and when you remove the drill, you if you find human remains in the drill, then you know, okay, there's something there, right? And or also you could take the soil out, and you could see if there's any presence of human DNA in there.
Mhm.
So this is what it is. And then they also found a jawbone fragment at the site, which
Right.
is considered to be of a young child, and it's probably about a century old, about 100 years old, and so this is a proof of an unmarked grave. So that is what the Cree Nation, the Star Blanket Cree Nation, that is actually spearheading this whole movement, is actually came out with the statement, actually. Okay, so this is just to give you a background of what is the what is a GPR and what it can do and what is an anomaly and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Now, to answer your other question, and also first, let me give a background of what this whole this why they're finding graves and what is the whole purpose of this investigation. So between the late 1800s and the 1990s. 1990s was about 30 years ago.
Yeah, and say also, you if you can show some light. Trudeau's dad was in charge of this time frame in the Catholic residential schools too,
Of
right?
course, Trudeau's dad what is his name? Pierre Trudeau, right?
Yes.
Was the Prime Minister of Canada, and when he was the Prime Minister of Canada, between what is it, 19? I
You
gotta.
can put it appropriately. I don't want to cut
Yeah, I
you
think it was from 1968 to 79, and from 1980 to 84, he was the Prime Minister of Canada. But we
Mhm.
are talking 1990s. So he was the Prime Minister when these residential schools were still in existence.
Mhm.
So, what was the purpose of these residential schools? So, the purpose of these residential schools was to run a Catholic system in this in this country, in Canada, and
Mhm.
now we have two kinds of system for schools, right? Which
Mhm.
is funded by the government. One is the public school, and one is the Catholic school. Catholic schools are still existing; they still exist, but they have they've closed down the residential schools. But these Catholic schools were actually run as residential schools, where kids were sent there, and they had to reside in the schools. They were boarded in the schools. Okay, they were boarded in the
Mandatory
school.
staying there.
I'm sorry.
Mandatorily, they have to stay there, kind of thing.
They have to, yeah. It's like they only get breaks like a Christmas break, summer break, March break. So about 3 to 4 times a year they get to go home. Otherwise, basically they're there. They get fed. They get there's a discipline as to when you wake up, when you sleep. You have extracurricular activities, after school, and a lot of it is based on the Christian
Who to
faith.
pray? Who to pray? What language you speak?
Yeah, and also who to worship, because it's all based on Christian faith. It's Catholic faith, right? So now what happened was, this country, Canada, doesn't belong to us, doesn't belong to the Caucasians or any of these people. The 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 ground that we live on, this Canada, the country, belongs to the indigenous population. Okay, so an indigenous population has been here ever since, like, long time ago. Like, we don't know the history of how long they've lived here, but they've lived here forever. So they own the lands. It's the explorers who came in, and they basically started occupying Canada, took over the land. And guess what they did? They took over the land from the indigenous population, and they fought wars and whatever. Indigenous population, they were only, the drawback with them was they were not united. They lived in different tribes, they lived in different communities, and each community was responsible for their own safekeeping, or their own well-being. All right, so they were very divided. And the Caucasian population that came in, the explorers who came in, they kind of took advantage of this, and basically they annihilated the whole the indigenous population, and they kind of put them into different
And
colonies, if
and
I
the
say.
indigenous population was kind also, kind and
Very,
courteous,
very absolutely. I
very
mean, they
kind
they
and
fought
courteous.
they fought however they could. But if you look at the Western movies like Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and all those Western movies with Clint Eastwood and John Wayne and stuff like that, they show the indigenous population in a very bad, in poor light, because they show them as the people who are cruel, who killed people. But no, that's not the truth. But the truth is actually that these guys were protecting their families, they were protecting their kids, and they
And
had to take weapons, but they didn't have the modern weapons like guns and whatever, right? Cannons and stuff like that. They only had handmade weapons, spears and
absolutely.
swords and stuff
and
like that.
Vinay ji, the so-called explorers were nothing but the part of the Christian missionary also,
They were Christian missionaries. Yeah, exactly. They were looking for
and they
land,
were coming
and
here
they
to
wanted to
develop the
spread
tribes.
the Christianity across the globe, right? So they came here, and now, to your point, these guys came in here, and once all the Indian population came under control, right? So in the 1800s, they started opening these residential schools. Okay, so the purpose of the residential school was to kind of uh, you know to kind of bring the indigenous kids into the residential schools so that they can learn the Catholic faith, and they will eventually grow to be the next, future generation will all become Catholics. So that was the whole idea, right? And the thing was, they were not allowed to follow their own their own religion, their own culture, or any of that. They changed their clothing, they changed their food habits, they changed the way they worship, they changed the way they worship, and stuff like that. So in the Christian missionary schools, like, it was unbelievably strict. And the problem with the indigenous kids was they were finding it very difficult to adapt. And when kids were not able to adapt, and when they were not willing to learn English, and when they were not willing to learn the Christian beliefs, guess what they did? They were trying to replace the indigenous language and culture with English and Christian beliefs, and kids who did not follow that were basically reprimanded and eventually killed as well. So these
All in
kids
the
who were
all in
killed,
the name of all in the name of love and Jesus.
yes,
you
yep,
know.
and when they were killed in such a way that the parents would not even have any trace of their bodies. So in the backyard of the schools, or a little far away from the schools, they used to take, like, 20, 30, 50, 100 kids, and just dig a big grave and just dump the bodies in there. And then when the parents came and asked for their kids, they used to say, oh, the kid ran away, we don't know what happened to the kid. So this is what was going on for over 100 years.
And these what is it true, right? These schools were managed by nuns and so-called fathers and brothers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Huh?
That's why they're called Christian missionary residential schools. So they were managed by nuns and fathers, and they were ruthless, and they had people who were mercilessly killing these kids. And the funny thing was, this went on up to 30 years ago in Canada, 1990s. Can you imagine? And this went past the Pierre Trudeau, who ruled. He was the Prime Minister of Canada in the 80s, and in the 60s he was there as well. So this guy was like unbelievable. Like, nobody did anything about it. The government didn't do anything about it. And now, after so many kids were killed, like, we are talking, apparently the statistic said that only 4,100 indigenous children died between the late 1800s and 1990s.
Died or
However, this is shocking to you. Based on the speaking to the indigenous families, more than 150,000 kids were separated from their families, and many of them have gone missing.
gone missing. And the kids who came back, they were totally brainwashed. They act like Uncle Tom. They don't even know their hereditary.
I tell you, there's a culture called Metis Inuit children, right? These people, they believe they're whites, they believe they're Caucasians, because that's how they were brainwashed, and they don't want to adapt, go back to their culture, because they feel that it's below their dignity or whatever. It's like, like some cultures, even in India, right? Like, if you speak English, you don't want to talk to a guy who doesn't speak English or whatever, right? They think English is the end all and or whatever of stuff. But you know what? Everybody has their own culture. Everybody's culture is rich, and this is what is important for that they should have recognized. But uh, very unfortunately, there were these kids were killed mercilessly, ruthlessly, and many of them who actually stuck with the children, stuck with the school system. They have been converted and brainwashed so much that today their kids and grandkids who are and great grandkids who are now living in Canada, you can tell apart. You can tell them whether they have a Christian name, John Abraham or something like that, or you can't tell, like, because It's very difficult to tell.
and
So that's the unfortunate part. They're really their objective was to wipe out the indigenous culture from
yeah,
this country.
and many kids grown up today don't even know they belong to the indigenous population. That
That's
is
what I
another
mean. That's exactly what I mean. So because
myths.
their culture has been wiped out from their brain, they've been brainwashed completely, and now uh, the whole objective of this residential school was to wipe out the indigenous population and the indigenous culture. That's it.
Now
But
let
unfortunately, that was not achieved. That was not accomplished. And now the government that is coming in now, Pierre Trudeau's son Justin Trudeau is now the Prime Minister of Canada,
he
um,
gives apology.
and he is apologizing and he's saying,
I'm
"Oh no, it
sorry.
shouldn't have happened," and we are sorry. And but sorry cannot bring back those kids who were
and
killed.
and Vinay ji, he tries to act like a messiah of the First Nations,
Exactly, yeah. But you know what?
along with this,
The First
along with
Nation indigenous people are very smart. They know what's going on.
along with his buddy Jagmeet Singh.
Oh God, that guy doesn't even know the his own culture because he claims he's Khalistani, and God knows, God help, he's kind of in a
He comes
he's
from
a
the same thing
confused
to brainwash.
state of mind.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
that's unfortunate for him, but that's the way it is, right? So yeah. So this is what's going on. So this just the to give you a background, the up to date, like in the last about 10-15 years, they have started looking around in Manitoba, in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, not so much in Ontario actually. So in all these provinces, they've actually been digging, finding graves and stuff like that. So far, 1,800 confirmed or suspected unmarked graves have been identified. And in each grave, it could be one body of a kid, or there could be multiple. So don't go with the assumption that 1,800 means only 1,800 kids were found. There were, in some graves, there were multiple bodies found.
Absolutely, absolutely. Vinay ji, let me ask you a question. Uh, During the Independence Day time, the many of the Canadian citizens boycotted the Independence Day because of that time they found like 2,000 graves, unmarked graves. You remember that incident? Many of the can you show light why the Canadians were boycotting the Independence Day celebration?
Because what is the whole purpose of independence, right? The Canadian independence was the two countries that were occupying Canada, where one was Britain and one was France. So then the Americans were also kind of coming into the to Canada, kind of to take over. And in some portions, the English, the British fought the Americans, and in some areas, like in Quebec, for example, the French fought the Americans, and it was like, and then the French and English also had some wars. So the independence signifies that Canada became independent as a country because it was one big North America, right, in the past. And when Canada became independent, everybody said, "Oh wow, this is now an independent country." But really, if you look at what is the true meaning of independence, right? The true meaning of independence is basically, when the population that actually owns this land, that actually has occupied this land from the very beginning of time, was never given that independence, right? So they have been put into colonies. I mean, and you won't even people won't even comprehend what is going on in Canada. They are in like little colonies, they're in little tribes, and they're kind of isolated in those little communities. If you go up north in Canada, for example, in Ontario and stuff like that, like you go past Sudbury, North Bay, and Manitoulin Island, and Sault Ste. Marie, and stuff like that, right? You will find communities, the indigenous communities, living by themselves, and they are confined to that area. They have a community school, they have a community center, they have a shopping, maybe a grocery store and stuff like that. But majority of the people who live in those communities are the indigenous communities. But if when you come to big cities like Toronto, Quebec, or sorry, Montreal, or any of Vancouver, you will see that the majority of the population is Caucasian, and it's very difficult. Only now you will see a few indigenous people coming in and trying to live here, make a living and stuff like that. But unfortunately, this is how it's been in Canada, that these guys are confined to a certain area. So they really did not have the independence. So that is the reason why the protest started. Because, if you really want to follow the meaning of independence, give them that independence. You don't need to keep them confined to a tribe or confined to a colony. Let them, everybody, mix around, and there should not be any of that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. One last question to you on this regard. Okay, we did a video on it, elaborate video on it, that Pope came to Canada at last to say apology again. You know, but when we speak to the First Nation leaders, the chiefs, they were not pretty convinced that it was. They felt it was a lip service.
Oh
You
yeah.
want to say something about it?
So, it's like the Canadian government has been doing lip service for the last little while, right? I mean, trying to say that, yeah, you know what, it happened, but we are very sorry for what has happened, and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Apologies doesn't really make a big deal. Like, how do you fix the thing? Right? Oh, yes, now it doesn't happen anymore. But how do you correct those things, right? How do you give their culture back to the kids who have been converted forcibly and things like that? That can never happen. It's so difficult to undo those things, right? And likewise, the Christian missionaries led by the Pope, obviously from the Vatican, they were the ones who kind of opened these residential schools and the Christian missionary schools, and kind of got these people to convert and forcibly convert. And if you don't convert, if you don't adapt to the lifestyle of the Christian missionary schools, the residential schools, then you'll be either tortured or killed. Like, you have basically destroyed families, destroyed kids, destroyed their future. Now, if the Vatican Pope comes in and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I hold your hand, and I apologize for this," you think those indigenous population, the families who are actually affected, will really care? I mean, some people gave him the opportunity to go and talk to a few families and stuff, but you know what? The real families that were being affected were actually kept away, because you know what? They will lose their mind if they confront the Pope. So that's why they were kept away. So this is the thing. So really, they don't care about Pope coming to apologize or the Prime Minister going to apologize, because for them, their families were destroyed, their kids have been annihilated, and their kids have been forcibly converted, and many of them have lost kids, innocent kids, to these brutal killings.
Absolutely. Vinay, really, I want to ask you one thing, one last thing. That is, Justin Trudeau and his partner, Jagmeet Singh, with their, as a combo, they have appointed the um, First Nation person as a first governor. Do you think this is a healing approach by Canada or in Canadian Prime Minister? What do you see this as?
I think it's a step in the right direction, because all these years we have never had anybody from the indigenous community as the Governor General of Canada, and this is a great move, because this is it's all part of the healing process, the way I call it, right? It's all part of the repentance, like how you repent and how you kind of hope people will start forgiving. And it's a step in the right direction. I'm not going to deny that. And Justin Trudeau, definitely took a good step in that way. But you know what? Just by appointing one person as the governor general from the indigenous community doesn't make all these go away.
Means you had to do what you had to do to regenerate the indigenous culture. But today, having said that, today the politician need so much votes from church.
You
Will
know,
they
you
be
brought up a
able to?
very, very, very good point. I think that's a great statement what you just made. It's the indigenous community, the way you want to, you know, bring back that, or try to correct or try to fix things, is to rejuvenate that culture. How do you do that? You establish indigenous culture in the mainstream. You establish indigenous languages in the mainstream. You establish indigenous stories, the background. They have a lot of stories, lot of culture. Everything that they do is done for a reason, you know uh, and it's unbelievable. Like, I have been going up north. I go to a place called Manitoulin Island, and I go to Sudbury, North Bay, in that areas, right? We go there every year, and I've been going there for the last 25 years. And
Wow.
I we go there, and we mix around with the families and stuff like that. There is so much to learn. Unfortunately, you cannot learn those things in Toronto. You have to go to their communities, and if somebody is willing, and to share those things, those stories, you'll be able to hear those things from them. But those are the things that the government has to do: bring those things to the awareness of the local population, to show how rich their culture is. That is how
Absolutely.
you kind of start creating that nexus between the indigenous population and the mainstream population.
Absolutely. Vinay, you have been enlightening us as usual, and thank you very much. Appreciate it highly, and thank you for your time, and thank you for joining Bharat Marg. Looking
My
forward
pleasure.
to seeing you again. Okay.
Thank you.
Uh, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.